Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grandline's online salon. I'm Roma, a communication coach from Grandline, Philippines, and I'm so excited to introduce to you my gorgeous partner, my guest co-host for today, and once again, Miss Florence Rivera. Miss Florence is a graduate of the University of the Philippines, and she is the former general manager and core founder of 51 Talk Philippines, and the former director of human resources of Go Fluent. Currently, she is the Secretary General of the National Association of Independent Travel Agencies, or known as NITAS, and the founder and CEO of Travelbug Philippines. And it's a pleasure to see you again, Ms. Florence.
Thank you, Roma. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me again. And just like you, Ms. Roma, I'm very excited to start our discussion of today's online salon.
Great. So in this program, we feature several social issues that will allow the speakers to share their expertise. The students who are also part of the audience will have a fair share of questions at the end of the discussion.
We will be asking them about the main topic, and at least two speakers will be given time to state their points. Just a friendly reminder, kindly set your microphone on mute unless it's your turn to speak. Let's begin.
It was not until 2012 when the Philippines recorded a 6.8% economic growth from 3.6% of 2011. The country reached the peak of 7.8% in the first quarter of 2013. It is the highest growth rate recorded under the leadership of former President Benigno Aquino III, faster than that of China, Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam for the same period. On the same year, Fitch Ratings and Standard & Poor's gave the Philippines an investment grade status of BBB negative. And soon after, Japan Credit Rating Agency leveled up the investment grade into BBB. Since then, the country has developed a number of economic zones, which have attracted many foreign companies.
That's really a commendable track record, Ms. Roma. Under the keen leadership of then Finance Minister Cesar Purisima, a multi-awarded finance minister, said to have turned around the Philippine story, the country became a popular hub for investors in the global platform. An influx of foreign investors allowed the country to create more employment and nurture a healthy business environment. In 2013, the World Bank said the Philippines is no longer the sick man of Asia, but the rising tiger. The fiscal situation of the government was becoming more sound, and transparency and macroeconomic stability were within reach. The fight against corruption was being waged with determination and paying off. This growth and positive outlook has continued until the current administration, with the now Secretary Carlos Dominguez at the helm as our new finance minister.
That's absolutely right, Ms. Florence. And as we strive to continue the momentum with a projected target growth of 6.5 to 7.5% in 2020 under President Duterte's administration, we're unfortunately struck by a pandemic due to COVID-19. In March this year, Moody's Investor Service, a credit ratings agency, further trimmed its Philippine economic growth forecast for this year to 5.4% after analyzing the impact caused by this crisis. Recently, the CEO World Magazine released an outline article that showcased 10 best countries to invest in post-COVID. And guess what, Ms. Florence? We earned the 7th spot out of 80 countries. Isn't that great? And these rankings were based on 11 different factors, including corruption, freedom being personal, trade and monetary, workforce, investor projection, infrastructure, taxes, quality of life, red tape, and technological readiness.
I am not surprised at all, Ms. Roma. The Philippines has the 12th largest population, and Filipinos are younger than the rest of the world. We have a very young, customer-oriented, and competent workforce. The country's strategic location as a natural gateway to East Asian economies and the number of IT parks and economic zones now make the Philippines a strong contender for investments. I'm sure the economy will bounce back as soon as we have addressed the health and safety concerns brought about by COVID-19.
I would like to assume positively to Ms. Florence, but in today's discussion, let's talk about factors and reasons why the Philippines is still one of the best countries for investments. But before anything else, let's start by introducing our esteemed speakers and distinguished guests. Well, it's an honor to welcome our first guest speaker, Mr. Koji Onozawa. He studied at St. Catherine's College, University of Oxford Kobe Institute. He finished Bachelor of Arts in Legal at Meiji University. He's a former Senior Vice President at RCBC and is also the founder and CEO of Global Business Strategies Incorporation. Good afternoon and welcome to our program, Mr. Koji Onozawa.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hey, good afternoon. Can you see me? Just a second.
No, I think your video is off. There you go.
Can you see me? Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Miss Roma, thank you for your kind introduction. It's a great pleasure to join this program. I have stayed and worked as a bank officer for 17 years in the Philippines. I'm really excited to be a part of this Grandline online salon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
We also have here our second guest speaker, Mr. Shigeki Matsuishi. He's a certified public accountant in Japan and a former manager at EY Japan. He's also the founder of Lapplace, an accounting and investment company. Lapplace is a subsidiary in the Philippines that focuses on real estate management and investment. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Matsuishi.
Thank you for introducing myself. So I'm Shigeki Matsuishi, the Japanese CPA, certified public accountant and tax accountant. And also I am also my company invested in the Philippines, the Makati, for the several properties. Then I'd like to talk about this topic on the perspective of investor to Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Matsuishi. So let's also welcome our last, but definitely not the least guest speaker, Mr. Christian Lauron. He took up MBA International Exchange Studies at the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth College, an Ivy League research university in Hanover, New Hampshire. He's a partner at SGV, now known as EY Philippines, and is also the head of government and public sector, as well as financial services advisory. Again, let's welcome Mr. Christian Lauron.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. As mentioned earlier, I'm with SGV Company. I look after the financial services sector and also the government and public sector. Thank you.
Hi, Sir Lauron.
And Ms. Roma, we still have one more guest, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so we have a guest audience. Let's also welcome Mr. Carlos Milen, the founder and CEO of Good Coffee Farms Incorporated, Japan. He is the founder and developer of a sustainable coffee process in Guatemala that will reach other countries soon. He wants his brand to be known as the most expensive coffee in the world. In fact, Bill Gates is one of his customers. So if you want to know more about his company, you may visit their website. It's going to be flashed on your screen. So welcome to our program, Mr. Carlos Milen.
Hello, everybody. I don't know, can you see me now?
Yes, we can see you very clearly. Thank you, sir, and welcome.
Thank you for your for the invitation. It's an honor for me to be here with all of you. And well, I'm not sure if Bill Gates is drinking my coffee, but I hope he will. And,
I hope so.
my intention is to make the most sustainable coffee in the world, giving the opportunity to the smallholder farmers around the world. And that was the first, the thing that took me to the Philippines last year. And I got to meet several of you over there, which, by the way, hello, Roma. Nice to see you again.
Hi.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Carlos Milen. And now
Thank you.
happy to, yes, thank you. So I'm happy to introduce to you our student in Grandline, Mr. Toshiaki Ono. He's a CPA and currently a senior associate in Financial Services Division in PwC Japan. It's nice to see you here, Mr. Ono, and welcome to our program.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you. Well, yes. So we will have Mr. Carlos Milan and Mr. Ono later during the Q&A session. But for now, please enjoy the discussion.
Thank you.
Okay. So due to the current pandemic, some foreign and domestic investors are reconsidering their investment plans and strategies. The CEO Magazine website recently published a list of best countries to invest in, and the Philippines made it to the top 7. Before the pandemic, the same magazine site released a list for 2019 where the Philippines was actually on the top 3. So how did the Philippines manage to stay on the top 10 best countries for investment despite the COVID-19 pandemic? That will be our first question for the day. Mr. Koji Onozawa, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you. Well, actually, I'm not at all surprised at that result. And even before the outbreak of the pandemic, the Philippines was ranked as one of the top promising countries for investment among Japanese investors and business people. For example, according to a survey conducted by JBIC, Japan Bank for International Cooperation, between July and September last year, the Philippines was ranked number 7 as a promising country to invest in over the midterms. The main factors of the results are its inexpensive but capable labor force, and further future growth potential of the local market, and among others, on top of the financial strengths Ms. Roma and Ms. Florence mentioned. In addition to the standing, the charismatic leader has been dealing with this crisis quickly and effectively. So compared with other neighboring nations, President Duterte declared the state of emergency at an early stage and recently lifted strict regulation in phases. Foreign investors think highly of his great leadership during this crisis that contributed to maintaining its high position in ranking, I believe.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Christian Lauron, do you want to say something about that?
Yes, thank you for adding. Thank you for allowing me to share also. If I may add as well, the items that we need to look at, meaning the preparatory policies for the past 3 or 4 years. These are additional dimensions to the ranking. Number 1, we are all aware about the Build program, the infrastructure program that really will provide the significant surge on the growth, and that growth, even if after we reprioritize post-COVID, is something that the government will still pursue. The other policy that we should be aware of is the ease of doing business. The government is very keen on streamlining and, in fact, in automating government processes just to make sure that it will not be difficult for businesses to do their ventures here. Another that I will explain later on is the tax reform program. I think we will be covering also the CITIRA, and as well as the changes that will be made, and it is now called the Create Tax Reform Program or Bill. Another is that for the past 4 years, coming on from the previous measures, there has been prudent fiscal management and also a directed economic thrust on the part of the government. And then again, later on when we discuss also the recovery measures, the reconfiguration measures of the government, there is also a strong push to reallocate the incentives to the countryside. And it is part of what we call the development dispersion strategy. So all of these policies in place and those that are being undertaken have significantly contributed to the ranking, in my view.
Hearing it from someone from SGV is, I think, a very optimistic. It's a very good, good news for us, for the Philippines. Okay, so sir, you mentioned Cetera and Create. Do you want to go ahead with that and talk more about the bill?
Oh, thank you. I am not privy to the details of the bill, but in one of our discussions with the government, the measure really is to rationalize the incentives. There will be incentives to be provided, especially for investors who will provide what the country needs. Now, I recognize that it is a big issue for our business community, especially those that have been looking at a stability for the fiscal and tax incentives. When I am an investor, when I come here in the Philippines, I usually have a number of years of what we call income tax holidays. There's a period, and then after that, there will be a gross income taxation of 5%, and that can go on for a long time. So that's what the government and Congress wants to revisit. And together with that is a significant reduction in the corporate tax rates. So in the calculations, the strategy is that even though there will be a decrease in the expected revenues from corporates, but the reduction in tax will draw in the needed investments, foreign direct investments. And in particular, if I may quote Secretary Dominguez and also Secretary Carl Chua as to what are the things that they are looking for from foreign direct investors, they are really, of course, number one, the FDI levels, number two, the jobs that will be generated, and number three, if I may highlight, innovation and technology. When you bring in innovation and technology, that would really spur a big economic multiplier, especially when it is brought to the regions, the southern regions. Again, I'll speak about what are these locations as part of the government's development dispersion or distribution strategy. Thank you for the question.
Okay. So, sir, I believe that with the Cetera or the Create bill, there's been mixed reaction, right? Especially for businesses that are already existing in the Philippines. Yeah. Why is that?
I'm in a very difficult spot. We have friends from the business and friends from the government, so I'll try to strike a balance here. In the view of the government, there are businesses that already earned, let's say, I would say enough. I don't have to mention what are these. If I wear my business hat, when I do business, I put in capital, I put in resources. So I should also have what we call reasonable payback and reasonable internal rate of return. And I need to fulfill also my commitments, not only to my creditors, to my employees, and also to my stockholders. So, when you start a business, you always have what we call a business plan, an investment plan, and a business case. And it's important that the assumptions stated there, including commitments from government, they have to be honored. And so I understand where the irritation could be coming from. But if I wear my country level view, I do believe that there is room for reallocating these tax incentives to especially industries that will provide the needed FDI, jobs, and innovation and technology. And for this reason, I also would like to add regarding news about whether the Philippines will compete with other countries like our brethren in Vietnam. We have to put that into perspective. It depends really on what type of industry or sector that would be, relevant. You have to consider also not only the competitiveness, but also the supply chain and the geographic factors. There are industries that, like in terms of the regional production network or value chain concept, it makes sense that you are nearer both your supply and also your consumer market. But for other locations, perhaps we have to look at other industries that are more niche or more competitive. And for instance, I'm looking at the industry relating to the semiconductor or the technology field. These are areas that I'm thinking that perhaps, especially if we have more scientists, more individuals that are in that field, and together with the technology transfer and innovation from our friends from other countries, then there will be a win-win situation. If that will be the strategy of the government, then we have to change also our incentives. So for instance, do we increase the deductibility for research and development expenses when you claim for tax purposes? That should be done as well. Another is that clearly in terms of corporate tax rate, you also have to reduce in exchange clearly for the economic multiplier impact. Another is that, and I have no, I'm not saying it's happening, but in one of our policy discussions with our friends from the Ministry of Science and Technology, and also even with the Ministry of Finance, is there a possibility for the government to what we call co-develop or co-invest in very high value R&D? You see, when we talk about high value R&D, that can really have easily a multiplier, economic multiplier of anywhere of ×3 or even more in the long run.
Very interesting. Mr. Koji Onozawa,
Yes.
what do you think of this? Have you heard of this new bill that is pending in the Senate, I believe?
Yeah. Well, yes. And from the foreign investors' point of view, I'm negative, to be honest. From the Japanese investors' point of view, especially, most potential investors want to get peso status, whether they are manufacturers or IT firms, etc. Is basically against those companies. So potential foreign investors are comparing the tax systems of neighboring nations to choose the best destination. So I would agree with CITRA framework if it includes maintaining the existing ITH or income tax holidays and the gradual reduction of the corporate income tax rate. So maybe this is the common idea from the Japanese investors, I believe.
I think that's more of a win-win situation, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
What do you think, Sir Christian? Why wouldn't they make it like that? Like the existing businesses can keep the existing agreements and the new ones can take the TIRA or the CREATE bill.
Okay. I think the Department of Finance did their study, and they are actually still open to discussions as the bill is being deliberated. On our part, we think, without looking at the specifics, that the tax direction and incentives have to be made stable for at least for a while. I cannot speak for my firm, but if you ask for my personal view, perhaps we can allow a period where there can be what we call a transition in terms of the incentives. Whether that will be 3 to 5 years, that's my humble view. But in terms of where it will be granted, I think it is best done by our government in consultation with the different business associations. We hope that our friends also in the business will recognize the situation that our government is in. And I think we also recognize that there are sectors, and we don't have to specify them, that we believe should have been, graduated already from the incentives. So, but again, I'm not competent to comment on that one, other than I do believe that it would help to have a transition period. And at the same time, you start working on your the development distribution strategy, like going to the south, for instance.
So expanding the market.
Yes, that's right. In particular, when we had previous discussions with the government, clearly pre-COVID, among the economic corridors that were actually looked at in terms of development were the following. When we say economic corridors, we did not look at the political groupings, but rather what would be the best configuration in terms of trade, investments, and also government development, with also participation, for example, from some governments. So number one, I would like to start with Bicol, Eastern Visayas, and Caraga corridor. So it's one corridor together. Another, or the second, is the Davao, Socsargen, and Barm area. And in fact, our friends in the state-owned government banks, I'm referring to Land Bank and the Development Bank of the Philippines, they have a very targeted program for BARM. And I'm aware also that they're working with the Japanese development and business community. And then the next corridor is Northern Mindanao and Central Visayas. The reason there is that for Northern Mindanao, you are actually looking at that area together with Caraga as the agri-food hub, and then for Central Visayas as the financial and service center hub. So that was the direction. In the news now, I think we have been hearing about the Balik Probinsya program, but that's only the first phase. The Balik Probinsya is what we call somewhat a relief start, but really the main, we call it reconfiguration strategy. Earlier I talked about relief, really help poor people, poor families, the vulnerable SMEs. So that's the relief strategy. That was the decisive move done by our government. Immediately just pay or just spend. Then the second, we have the recovery program. So right now we have a pending bill in Congress, and I encourage my friends in both the development and business community to please monitor these developments. And then number three, we call it the reconfiguration. So an example of reconfiguration is that during this crisis, we realized that we are very dependent on certain items from other countries, like even on the matter of agriculture or food. And so the government decided that we must have a strong push for agriculture. So that means there will be really production, and the immediate focus is particularly in Mindanao, in the areas that I have mentioned. So part of the reallocation of the incentives is actually destined for the agro, especially the agro-industrial locations that are either already determined or to be determined in Mindanao. I know for a fact we just had discussions with, I'm sorry I cannot disclose, a number of local governments in Caraga and Northern Mindanao. They are already in final steps of securing development finance. They have already done their studies on making it an agri-hub, to modernize their ports, create another port. So these are vital, and they are actually consistent also with the reprioritized build of the government. I'm sorry if I talked a lot, but I hope that's helpful.
That's okay. That's good. But I'm curious, Sir Koji, what do you think from an investor's point of view? What do you think of these economic corridors and everything that Mr. Lauron here has shared with us?
That's a great idea. Well, the Philippines has its own, situation. So it's better to have several corridor programs, I think. Yeah.
Would you invest in any of these new corridors?
Well, I'm not sure, but I think for example, if once Japanese manufacturers, big manufacturer related to semiconductors, they can hire 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 people and then they usually comply with the minimum wage, and they pay legally. So I think that the government should protect those good companies and good citizens.
Okay.
So I think it's a good idea to separate the foreign tax system for foreign manufacturing and IT business and the local companies based on the each conditions, I think.
Okay.
By the way, Sir Koji and Christian, please, if you have questions, just go ahead and ask.
Mr. I have a question for Onozawa-san. I know he was very, he's an exceptional banker before. We
That's right.
met previously in the bank.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Do you think the banks will follow also the investors when they go south, like whether that's in Barm or Northern Mindanao or Davao? Clearly, Development Bank of the Philippines and Land Bank of the Philippines, they have to be there because that's their mandate. But I wonder if the commercial banks have the same appetite.
Yeah. Well, I think the almost all of the universal banks have interested in investing in the agriculture and fishery in Mindanao, and I've been there twice. I mean, in Mindanao, and it's so clean and safe city. And I like durian, a lot of durians they provide. So the image of Mindanao is not so great for foreigners, especially for Japanese investors, because of the a lot of problem. It seems to be the problem, but it's not the big problem for Filipino people, I guess. But the image of Mindanao is not so ideal yet. So PR, promotion from their local side, they should appeal their attractiveness to outside, including China, Japan, Korea, and the rest of the world.
Okay.
That will make investors attractive to invest in the Mindanao, I think.
You just gave me an idea when I talk to my fellow SGV partners, and then when we talk, for example, with the likes of Asian Development Bank, we should create doing business in these corridors, attractiveness, so that they would know more. Like, for example, the ADB, they have been pushing the BIMP IAGA, the Southern Corridor development. So so you just gave me an idea, because in SGV we have this doing business in the Philippines publications. It is actually in more than 10 languages already.
Oh yeah.
So we'll work on having doing business in Mindanao, or in specific locations in Cebu or Leyte or Davao and so on, or Barm.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, actually, for example, Mindanao is so attractive in terms of the fresh fruit, fresh produce, and the fishery business. And later on, I will talk about sixth industry, which is the agriculture is combined with second industry and tertiary industry. It's like farm to table. That field, especially in Mindanao, can develop, and then they will, get tuna and the pomelo and
mangosteen,
and they will not just transfer, deliver that fresh produce or raw fish, but they will process, and delivery
Okay.
to
Right.
add value.
Mhm.
That will be the surviving, point.
Okay.
Yeah, I love, Mindanao, Pomero, tuna.
Lalo is cheap in Davao.
Okay.
Cheaper than in Metro Manila.
Oh, it is. It is. Yes.
Yeah.
Disclosure, Flo. By the way, although I'm from Cebu, I grew up in Digos, Davao, and I used to ride my motorcycle in a lot of places in Mindanao. So
Oh,
just to let you know,
kaya
yes.
naman, sir.
You should try one of these days.
Yeah. I'm Ilonggo, actually. I'm from
Oh,
Bacolod.
I see. That's another rich location also.
Yes, Bacolod and Iloilo, I think.
Yes, that's right.
Really good places to invest. So, Sir Koji-san, thank you so much for your insights. I think that's a very good insight. The image, the promotion. I hope our friends at the Board of Investments and Department of Finance are listening as well. Because I think we really need PR. We need to sell the Philippines to the investors.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Mindanao, actually.
Mhm. That's good to know.
Okay, so unfortunately, we are running out of time for the first question. So I'll see you later. Sir Koji-san, Sir Christian, thank you so much. And I'll pass you on to Miss Roma now.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And I'm really happy to hear the reasons why our country is still considered an ideal place for investments after COVID-19. I hope that investors will still be encouraged to put up business here. Well, moving forward, please tell us, and let's have question number 2. What are the profitable industries under the current situation? So let's start with Mr. Lauron.
Thank you. So on the second, just a moment. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Okay. I hope everyone can read between the lines between what I will say, because I will have to wear my firm hat. The past few weeks or months, we have been performing what we call sector by sector assessments. And let me just say or share that these are the possible winners. Of course, when we say possible winners, it is very important to understand that it also matters how you are working on the opportunity, and at the same time, are you also getting the right support, whether that will be with investment or technology or equipment, for instance, especially when we go to these sectors. So these are the possible winners, if I may highlight. Clearly, the healthcare sector, as you can see with the pandemic, there is a surge in terms of the caseload. And when we speak about healthcare, it is whether you talk about the healthcare on the financial side or the HMO programs, to one where you also look at the capacity of our hospitals. Another would be on telecommunications, particularly the retail part. Then let me speak about technology. Technology is actually, it is of course to be expected, and it has wide-ranging implications, particularly if there is no vaccine yet. And I'm reading that we may have to wait for at a minimum of 12 to 18 months. So that means that the way we will be dealing with society or working or going to school would be affected. And so here are the concrete implications that we are now working on. Like, for instance, the government is looking at how to increase the level of remote work, and also in terms of the delivery of services. And I think it is a public knowledge that since it caught us by surprise, and even the government has already mandated all the departments to review and submit their technology plans to be able to determine what can be made faster, and also in terms of the proportion of people that will be working, and then what types of services, meaning you don't have to go to long lines or to governments. And if I'm not mistaken, aside from the licenses or permits, business permits, even the national ID, these are some of the things that the government is looking at, fast tracking the using the technology side. Another is with respect to the electronic invoicing. I think we are the only country in either ASEAN or Asia that still require manual invoices to be filed, and that was one of our points raised with the banking and the government sectors, that if we can automate the electronic invoicing, then we think the digital processes for the corporates will be made faster. Another sector that we view to be a winner is clearly the retail and logistics businesses. But I would like to highlight this would be for the essential, meaning not the essential goods, whether that would be that would pertain to anything about food, anything about health. So that's another possible winner for the pandemic. And finally, I have to highlight really agriculture. Agriculture, but it's not just about, and I share the view of my colleague earlier, that it's not just about agriculture on the upstream side, meaning like, you just plant and then you just deliver it raw. No, in my travels in the past, especially when I go to Japan, and I'm really amazed with how I'm a frequent visitor of Japan, and I have visited their factories, like how they are able to, like a banana, for instance. In our country, in the Philippines, we just plant and export the banana as it is. But did you know that when you go to Japan, there are really several products, derivative products out of the banana, and the packaging, it's really very beautiful, and of course the taste is really very good, and then the shelf life is much longer. So the agriculture that we in SGV are looking at is it would be three streams. So number one, it would be the upstream agriculture development. So we really have to execute what we call how we can have economies of scale for the farm area. Like in sugar, for instance, it would be difficult for you if you just only have a small lots, but if you combine them into like 50 to 70 hectares, that would be really an optimal size. Then the second would be the midstream agro-industrial. So that's where we really have to take a more production and industrial approach to our fruits, especially the high value ones. And then number three, the downstream agribusiness, where we have the variety of products. So like what I have described, like the case of Japan. So those are at least the sectors that are the possible winners. Again, I'm talking about the sector by sector. There are also possible, those that will be distressed, but I think we can go to that later on.
Yes, thank you so much,
Thank you, Roman.
Mr. Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Lauron. Those are very helpful for us to know the profitable industries such as healthcare, remote and digital work, logistics, and agriculture. I would like also to know, from Mr. Onozawa, what do you think are the profitable industries under this current situation?
Yes. Well, so experts say that there will be the second and third waves of the pandemic. With this prediction in mind, businesses closely relating to living essential industry and education technology and highly likely to be beneficial and valuable. They are also in line with the SDGs goal. So I'd like to take up three fields to recommend. First of all, as Mr. Lauron said, agriculture field, and it's called the kind of farm or ocean to table. Not just deliver fresh produce or fish to consumers, but agriculture and fishery plus processing plus distribution channel will make them fly off the shelves. So we call it the sixth industry for primary, because the primary industry is combined with the second and tertiary industry. So during the self-isolation period, a lot of canned tuna, canned oil sardines, and canned tomatoes have been sold from the shelf. So on the other hand, a great amount of veggies have been discarded around the world because of the forced closure of restaurants and the schools or whatever. So we need to match the demand and the supply by doing sixth industry. And I was rushed to buy pre-packed foods such as the Sinigang and baboy. It's a mix of vegetable and the seasoning and baboy, pork, right?
Yeah.
So that's a pre-packed food for this kind of disastrous period will help all the nations to survive on, I think. And secondly, hygiene-related business. If you have been to Japan, you must have used an automated warm washer bidet or shower toilet in airports, restaurants, residents, anywhere you went. That can keep a virus off and help to prevent the spread of the virus. And the third one is education technology. So advanced online education can reduce the education expenses and achieve the equal opportunity for the fair competition, I believe. Even in Japan, a lot of high school kids and middle elementary and junior high school people only stay at home and just do their homework based on the paper homework and send it by mail. But partly, some private schools started online, education both ways, but it's still, very few rich private school can do it. So to achieve the equal opportunity for the fair competition, it's necessary even for Japanese government to introduce the online education. I think the Philippines has a similar situation as that Japan has. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Koji, for that one. Well, the situation doesn't seem to be improving very soon, but thankfully technology has turned out to be a great savior for many industries. So at this very uncertain period, does your company also provide online trainings or sessions or webinars or podcasts like the Accountancy Europe podcast, providing informational videos or substantial discussions to people?
In our case, since we had this work from home, we have just kidding, 24-hour webinars and online calls.
24 hours.
Yes, just partly kidding, but it's really even easier for us. If I may share my experience, it was actually easier for me to collaborate with my colleagues from other countries. Like for instance, when I asked my colleagues from Hong Kong and Japan to share their experiences, or friends from Poland, New York, and Italy, they right away attended and in fact helped arrange meetings with clients, businesses, and government. So I'm amazed. I mean, of course, we have been using this technology, but I'm really amazed at how it can be really quick in terms of the transmission and sharing. Like, for instance, when we showed when we shared with them, look, here's something that we're doing for a local government in terms of improving their information dashboard, their contact tracing, the monitoring of the caseload, working with the hospitals. And then a colleague said, oh, why don't you speak with our friends from, let's say, this country, because they have actually implemented. And then so we got introduced, and in a matter of 2 days, we started, improving our processes. So it's very amazing as to, how technology, when, directed, really in terms of purpose. But I have to highlight that it also worked because we had the prior relationships or prior friendship. So I cannot imagine how, for instance, if I am, let's say, an advisor, I want to reach out to you and we don't know each other. I honestly don't know how it will be worked out. But for those that are in banks, like the branch manager, there was a joke. There's an anecdote wherein the mother of one of my colleagues, my managers, their family have 5 bank accounts, right? Only one branch manager called the mother, and then the mother said, "Oh, she called me. Maybe I should move all my other bank accounts to my balances to that the bank who called me, because I mean, with uncertain times, you need to have that level of connection as well." But anyway,
Exactly.
I'm sharing that because in the past, pre-COVID, when we talk about trainings, it tends to be like, and we're also guilty with that. When we deliver the webinars, it tends to be like a one-way, approach. Like, oh, I'll talk about tax 101 and just listen. That's it. But now, with this situation, anyone can practically, ask questions directly to you, and you have no excuse because well, I have nowhere to go. I cannot say I'm elsewhere with the quarantine. So, but I think those are. I feel that education technology. I strongly agree. I feel bad I did not highlight that one. Our Department of Education, actually, they already have an education technology program, but they do admit that they need more improvements. And also, we have to recognize also that it can also highlight differences. I mean, after all, our society still has differences. And I would like to mention that, we should also make online or educational technology truly accessible to everyone, regardless of your social status or your economic status. So, in fact, I asked some banker friends, maybe you can come up with financing facilities or work from home financing facility. Got talk to like a housing finance person. That maybe in a home in the Philippines, if that's middle class, you can probably grant a loan, give it 25-year loan, 20-year loan to have a section where you have an educational or an online facility. And I'm just thinking out loud, Roma, but we need that. I've been to the provinces. I mean, even within the cities. I mean, the inequality can be really very stark. So we must be mindful about that. That no one will be left behind when we go to the educational technology part.
Exactly. I agree with you, Mr. Lauron. How about Mr. Koji? How are you coping up with this big work transition in this pandemic?
Yeah, so I'm a Japanese salaryman, including me. For example, I had online drinking session 5 times in last 2 weeks, much more often than normal before COVID-19. So, and online learning, webinar, online drinking session, it's kind of already became common, became usual thing. And but my kids much more know about more. And so even the in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s are now becoming, kind of well versed with these gadgets and how to use it. and then how to get the new information, right? And so I agree with the idea that it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. We have to change. We have to adapt to a new era, and those who can do it can survive and prosper. So it's definitely a great opportunity to invest in, potential companies, whether they are large or SMEs, if their leaders and management have flexibility and their strategies to adapt themselves to any changes and quick implementation in the right direction. So we have to have, good judgment to find out those companies and those people and those, friends. So, and I think new industry and new businesses for a new normal era. So I have an automated delivery system by drone or whatever, or flying cars in mind. They can be controlled by AI to avoid the heavy traffic and the traffic accidents. Anything can be possible after COVID-19, but we have to prepare for the second wave and third wave to survive ourselves, right? Yes.
Yeah. So I'm sorry.
Roma. Sorry if I may add, Roma, because Onozawa-san mentioned about like the use of AI. We have a group in SGV. They are what we call the modelers and the data scientists, and so they are actually helping us now to how we are able to, when we work with our clients, when you get these calculations, whether these are banking figures or accounting numbers, you go through a process, and in the past you get these files and then you try to analyze them. Now we are forced to really do everything on the cloud, and not just for storage purposes, if I may use the term cloud computing. So even the steps of financial analysis and evaluation, somehow we also have to change and adapt because how I don't think we will be returning to a situation where we'll be dealing with our clients, getting the information. You really have to meet halfway in terms of ensuring that these are done and still under a secure environment, and then that you have the trust as well, because later on, after you have done your evaluation, the next step is to authenticate. So I cannot imagine how you can authenticate. It's all right, Mr. Koji, if I have my hanko and stamp.
Yeah.
But no more digital. Is there a digital hanko? Okay, I'm fine with it to authenticate. So that's our next challenge now. That the evaluation came from Mr. Lauron. Is it really verified, authenticated? That's our next immediate step now.
Yes, totally. I guess we only have this only option right now to be technologically inclined, because this is the new normal of learning and new normal working. But this will be my last question for our discussion. How important is pandemic contingency planning in all businesses, so that the affected industries can bounce back from COVID-19 economic effect?
First of all, let's not forget that this is still a health shock. This is not an economic or financial. Of course, there are serious financial and economic situations. So we, in our company, the safety and health of our people is the first or the primary determinant. Like when the quarantine was started to be gradually lifted, we had to categorize our people, but at the same time, we were conscious about the data privacy, because you will have to know about the health situation of your colleagues, where are they living. So only in our case, the partners have that information. Then we were able to categorize, and then, but if you ask me in our group, I told my colleagues, no, as long as the quarantine is there, our default mode is work from home. However, just working from home is not enough. So we also have to make changes in our office. We have to talk to our clients. What are the new protocols? What changes we will have to make when we do business with them? In our building, for instance, we can occupy only up to 30%. I know the other probably locations are looking at 50%, but in our case, it's 30% use of the location. We must have this, pandemic plan, not only the response or reaction part, but also really thinking through. And perhaps in another session, we can share more about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lauron. How about Mr. Onozawa? What can you say about this pandemic contingency plan that all industries should have?
Yes, I think that not only in the Philippines, but also in Japan, all companies in all industries have hugely affected. And for example, Japanese government, distribute 100,000 yen to each national. It's still ongoing. And for SMEs, they will receive, 500,000 yen to 1 million yen if they comply with the request of shutdown for a certain period. And of course, it's not enough, but to contain the pandemic, they have to do that kind of strict measure. But this week, most of the most prefectures in Japan, except for Tokyo area, as the regulation has been lifted, nearing the normal operation. So so far, maybe the number of company went bust is so limited, less than maybe 200 companies so far. Yeah. So it has been successful, I should say, in Japanese cases. And I'm not sure about the situation of the Philippines, but so far so good, because the number of fatality, number of death is under 1,000 people. So Filipino government is doing quite well, and COVID-19 is under control of this current administration. So it should be evaluated highly, I think.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Koji and Mr. Lauron. So while the coronavirus pandemic may seem like a once in a lifetime event, the reality is that an emergency can come along to disrupt all types of businesses at any time. So thank you so much, Mr. Lauron and Mr. Koji, for sharing with us your very important knowledge and information about this latest issue that we have right now. So let's continue the discussion with Ms. Florence.
All right, so I'm learning, I'm getting so many ideas from our guests today, Roma. So I think what Koji-san said about hygiene, investments in hygiene, you're right, sir. I totally agree. We need that in the Philippines, especially in our public restrooms. That's a lot around the country. And I also like what you said about online technology. I think that's really the future now. And COVID, if there's something positive that COVID brought, I think that's it. It's the realization that everything can be done. Pretty much everything can be done from home and online.
Oh, yeah.
From now on. Yes. So our third question is actually very similar to our second question. After the pandemic, what do you think are the business ventures, or what business ventures will you recommend? So maybe to make it a little bit different, we can talk about, say, investing in startups versus listed companies or large companies. But I would like to hear from Mr. Shigeki Matsuishi first. Sir, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, currently I'm interested in some kind of business venture like the online something. So in Japan, currently the online medical services started. The patient can ask the doctor via online and to take the medicine from the doctor. Also, the doctor can avoid to see the patient face to face. So if the people have a catch a cold or catch a cough, however, currently people cannot go out, go to the hospital because maybe people can have to see the other patients who had the COVID-19. Then some people want to take a medical service on the online. So, however, this is a little bit complicated because the Japanese government and other countries' government set a rule for the medical service. So if some country can allow the doctor to give the medical service online, but the other country do not. So I don't know in detail the Philippine situation. However, I think this online medical service will be increased in future. And then also currently people can get the medicine at the drugstore and so. However, I think currently in Japan, some kind of the drugstore give the very professional medicine to the patients without any invitation from the doctor. So this is related to the regulation, but people want to get the medicine easily without any traditional medical service. Then this online medical service and also the online medical service is necessary for the future. And I think that relative service, the venture company will give the service to us.
Okay, so I think what you are talking about, sir, is what we now call telemedicine. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm seeing a lot of new companies. I think a lot of startups from other countries are coming in with that kind of business model. Telemedicine. You're right. I think that's going to be the future as well.
And also currently we are often use the online something like online drinking session and online education, and also we often use the online shopping. Then the country maybe the microfinance will be increased more. So currently people do not have enough money to purchase something products via online, but we do not have enough money to do so. However, if the microfinance company give the short money to do so, people often use it, and then that microfinance company will be increased. But the current bank, the financial institution, does not want to do so because the microfinance is very complicated. Then the huge bank and the financial institution doesn't want to do so. However, we often use the smartphone and other devices for the online shopping. Then microfinance is we need some venture company give that service to us.
Yes. Sir Shigeki Matsuishi, and same question for Koji-san and Sir Christian, because you all mentioned online education, telemedicine, which is also online. So pretty much all of these internet-based companies, right? But in the Philippines, I think there is a need to improve the internet infrastructure, especially in the regional or provincial areas. So do you think, despite that limitation in internet infrastructure, these could still be good investments?
Yeah, I think so. So of course, in my point of view, the people have to leave the urban area or the center business district and so on. So if the people leave the suburban area without any Wi-Fi, people cannot use that online service. But currently, some people does not want to leave the center area. Want to leave the suburban area, like not Tokyo, not Makati. So I think in that case, the government will expand the infrastructure to the suburban area, and then the infrastructure company will get the more profits to develop these areas.
What do you think, Koji-san?
Oh yes, I have same opinion actually, and yeah, microfinance will be very useful and beneficial for the quite number of people. And then under this condition, government will spend a lot of money for the purpose of build, to hire a lot of Filipino people. And the policy mix should be, considered, I suppose.
Yeah. Sir Christian, would you know of any initiatives by our government to improve the internet infrastructure specifically?
I'll share what I'm aware of, Florence. I think you know that there's already a third player, and in fact, as we
controversial,
and as we speak, they are actually laying out already cables, and they're digging already, and they're furiously moving. I am not aware as to the like what is their target, but I think they really want to put in place everything by this year. That's a very ambitious target, really. So it would be interesting to know where they are in terms of their rollout, accomplishment. If that part is quite silent, maybe it doesn't mean nothing is happening. So that's one. Number two is, of course, this was pre-COVID. We had the opportunity of preparing one of the roadmaps for the country for emerging technology, and this is actually on space. No, and I think everyone knows that our friends from Japan have been very helpful for the satellite. And the head of the Philippine Space Agency, in one of our discussions, he mentioned that the country, that the Philippines really would still go for having its own satellite, also subject to the cost as well. And there were several reasons cited, and one of them is that also to complement the internet backbone. The original, or rather the draft target, is to have this satellite in 3 years. But again, with the COVID situation, let's see what will be the plan. So far, in terms of the internet connectivity, it is a priority, especially now with the pandemic. the government has put already the digital economy as a priority economic policy. This is not just about, just digitalizing functions and processes. It recognizes that it is a vital, economic driver, especially for our recovery. I still have to look for the data, Florence, but if, like in power sector, you determine your supply and demand, right? Like how many megawatts do you need, and therefore you plan the power plant. Same also with the digital economy or the connected economy and the related internet connectivity. Are we already preparing for, like, are we talking about hundreds of petabytes already, or even exabytes? I think that kind of thinking should be pursued already at the policy level, so that government and the private sector will now start creating the right business plan, investment plan, and stable taxation policy. Meaning, you do not just, you're earning, I will now tax you. No, it should not work that way. I mean, it has to be as part of a methodical and deliberate investment policy and financial plan. So I can confirm that that kind of thinking is already happening now in government, to look at the digital or the connected economy. I think the term will be connected economy, not just digital economy.
That's great to know, because, for example, right now in our current situation, the Department of Education needs to roll out the online technology, right? You mentioned that earlier,
Yes.
but and they said that they had a survey to check if everyone can access that. But then there are others who are saying they don't even have internet to access the survey.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the problem.
Yeah.
So I think that's why they got a high result, is because the people they surveyed are those that had internet.
Okay.
Those
That's
who don't have access to it were not able to answer the survey.
Yeah, that's right. That's one unintended situation, Florence. So that's why this internet connectivity is now being treated by government as an essential infrastructure. So in the past, when we talk about infrastructure, we often refer to hard infrastructure like ports, roads, and bridges. And then we also have the soft or social infrastructure, like for health, education. So the other element really is the internet backbone, the infrastructure backbone. So aside from the broadband strategy, and then allowing a third player, and then considering the satellite as an option for the unserved locations, of course we have to balance the cost there. But like I can cite that in the case of Indonesia, instead of building and creating their own, they link to, for instance, I think I forgot the name. It's a satellite company. I think it's the Starlink system, the one with Elon Musk, and their investment there. They call it the Nusantara Satu. Their investment was around $250 million. And I kidded the head of the Philippine Space Agency, oh, that looks like your entire budget already. So, but anyway, at least those are the options that are being considered to really seriously address the internet backbone issue.
That's true. Good. That's good, sir. Because I think before we can even talk about these investments in AI and all these technological advancements, we have to first improve our internet infrastructure in the Philippines.
And learn also from our experts also, not only locally but especially from other countries, and especially
Japan.
yes, our friends in Japan have been very helpful. If our Japanese friends here are not aware, I know of two friends who are right now based in Tokyo. They are actually part of the satellite program of the government, and they actually toured me to one university. We also went to Hokkaido, also the Hokkaido University. to understand really not only the space but also the agriculture program of Japan. So thank you also to our friends from Japan for, as always, being helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thanks to Japan. Going back to Mr. Shigeki Matsuishi, what do you think of these investments in, as Sir Christian mentioned, in space and satellite technology? Do you think Japanese investors will be interested?
Yes, I think so. However, I don't understand. I cannot expect the in future because of course the telecommunication, communication technology will be increased. Then the people do not go to the office and the education place, and then the however, I think the such a commercial office and so on is necessary for the enough space and so on. So I think when I go the Philippines, we can see the many people in the city, and then I think that they cannot keep enough social distance for communication. So not only the Philippines but also the other countries. So maybe some government set the rules for the social distance. Then people have to keep the enough space and for the business and the education and so on. So in that case, the relative business will be necessary for the social distance, like so the office supply is also necessary enough space for the workers. Then I would like to talk about the property, the investment property in the Philippines. Currently, there is so limited space for everywhere, not only residence but also the commercial place. So in future, the many property that keep the enough space for their business, not only business but also the residence. Then maybe a little bit bigger property is preferable for the investors.
Okay.
Florence, may I? I'm sorry if
Yes,
I may
sir.
add about the property part, because I think property will be hit. But if you look at what's happening now, even without waiting for government, businesses are already reconfiguring, right? Like there are some assets, whether these are big spaces, concert grounds or coliseums. Oh well, of course, working with government, they are now being repurposed as testing and quarantine facilities. And I think in our country, we have quite a number of property or land that are originally intended for tourism. So now, because you have, let's say, a drastic cut by 70% to 80% of your, mobility, travel, and the like, and it might be the case for a really long time. My view, I am happy to be proven wrong, is maybe we're like 2 years or so. So before we can even have a serious return to the same activity levels or even half of it. So it makes you think also, if the government is going to disperse development to the countryside, so that means you need to have simultaneous development in different locations, economic centers of gravity, meaning you do not just develop the periphery because you have become big like Manila. No, you must develop simultaneously. And in that process, one of the things we're broaching with government is that this idle land, why don't you just donate it already for affordable housing development if it is owned by government? or you know, because prices will drop anyway. I mean, messing is all right, but at least you arrest already, or you preempt the situation by coming up with like simultaneous development. I can easily identify 5 locations wherein this development, where you invite the developers, the bankers, and the government to, you know, let's go back to the drawing board. And the minimum exercise is revamp right away the land use plan. Every local government in the Philippines must have a land use plan. It is not yet required by law, but I remember the president, he said that this is one of his priority legislation or bills, but I don't know what happened along the way. But even without waiting for Congress, every local government must have a land use plan where you know where will be the, you know, commercial district, the home and the like. It has to be really you know, empowered with enough, you know, support that no one can just change it.
Right.
And then from there, that will really add to the stability of development, clarity in direction. And then for the Department of Finance, it will also help them in their revenue planning. I mean, it will also help them project how much they will also earn. So I'm reacting to that because I just remembered that this crisis has actually shown which local governments or you know, or prefectures in the case of Japan are really doing very well or moderately, or leaves much to be desired. And as a firm, we are really of the view that local governments must now revamp their land use plan. And then at the same time, the developers, the bankers, and the government must, you know, depending on which location, already, you know, craft what will be the, especially for the home development strategy to complement the dispersion or the distribution of the development. And you know, if I may share statistics based on the latest data, our per capita. I'm just looking for my notes now, Florence. Okay. The national capital region, in terms of per capita, we have here $9,513 per capita, and it is 3 times the national average of 3,000. So imagine if you disperse or distribute the development. Imagine the, you know, the effect in terms of growth and prosperity, at least on those locations that I have identified earlier. The distribution or the dispersion should be methodical and should involve targeted sectors. And to my mind, call me traditional. Any economic growth must always have a property strategy, a property development strategy.
That's true. I think Sir Koji-san can comment on that.
Oh yeah. So well, as you know, Japan is the Tokyo-centric society. Tokyo has 14 million people, and then Tokyo and Osaka are 2 major cities. And then those cities, prefecture have a huge number of COVID, positive. So as you said, the local cities, but big cities, who can attract workers and provide a lot of jobs, it will be successful to develop locally but simultaneously. And those cities should have their own attractiveness, whether tourism or some amusement park or something. And the point is that those local cities should have capacity to accept a lot of jobs. And in order to do so, they need advanced transportation system. Not only trains, but also buses and some other things. And yeah, I agree. I can agree with you more. So big cities, but local cities should attract people, especially from the big cities. Many people from Tokyo and Osaka to those cities, and then they will, share the advanced and latest technology and knowledge between Tokyo, Osaka, and those local cities that can develop the country itself.
Right. Okay, so this is a very interesting discussion. Before we move on to the question and answer part, Mr. Matsuishi, I would like to get your final comment before we move on.
Okay, so actually, as we talk, with Japanese investor want to know how to develop or how to prevent from this COVID-19 based on the government or local government plan. So if the local government, the local ways establish the new city plan for new infrastructure, new technologies. So that city will be attractive for the investor, not only investor, but also the citizens. Then in future, not only us, but also the other countries' investor want to concentrate on that information for the new city development.
So we have to start making new cities in the Philippines to get more investments. Okay, so as we move towards the end of the program, we encourage the audience to ask questions. So to those who will be asking questions, kindly state your name first. And if your question is specific to someone, please identify that person. Who will go first? Please turn on your video as well. What about Mr. Carlos Milen? Do you have any questions for our speakers today?
Hi, can you see me?
There you go. I can see you now.
Well, it's been a very interesting.
Right?
Yes, all the topics.
I hope we have more time. But
yes. Yeah, I had the chance to go to the Philippines last year, so I think that one of the main reasons why, even now during this pandemic, the Philippines gets to be in that place to be like the seventh best place to invest is because people knew from before the development of the Philippines. And like talking about myself, the impression that I had about the Philippines, I came back to Japan feeling like I wanted to go back immediately and start my business there. Well, I still am planning to do it.
Yeah, why not?
Yes, we all need to accommodate right now to the situation. Like everybody was talking about, like having these even nomikites, like drinking, like these parties. In my case, I work with coffee. Guess what we do in coffee? And after you hear this, you will understand how bad it is for me. We do coffee cupping. What is that? Coffee cupping means that we put a sample of coffee in one cup, and then we all have a spoon. We could be a group of people. We all taste that coffee from the same cup. That's impossible to do it right now. and somehow I think that we're not going to get back to that anymore. So we need to adjust the new normal. So now I have to send little samples to everybody and do some meetings, or something I've been doing recently a lot is using the social media, Instagram, to have live Instagram events, etc. So this is the way we need to proceed also with the Philippines. And as a matter of fact, I'm planning to have a couple of events with people related to coffee in the Philippines to take back this the conversation that we had last year to start doing something with coffee in the Philippines. I will extend a little bit to the part of the agriculture area, and in which at the end, I will just leave you with one of the questions that I have there. For agriculture, I believe that it's important to invest in food, because, well, we can run out of many things, but that food is very important. And in taking care of the people that are doing that hard job of bringing the food to our tables, I think it's more than just a business chance. Is a responsibility to all of us to make sure that we're going to have food. So something I've seen is that these people in the very remote areas are struggling to find their way. And when, for some people, it could be tragedy and a big problem, I think that thinking in a smart way, it could be a really good chance right now. My belief, and this is why I started Good Coffee Farms, is to do good business in good ways and to be good for everybody. Sustainability is very important, and sustainability has three big areas. One is being obviously the environmental, but then we have the economic and the social. And I believe that from now on, the world needs to focus on that part a lot more than before. Therefore, we need to invest in innovation. Innovation doesn't have to be always related to technology, the high-end technology and very expensive equipment. As in my case, we are using bicycles to produce coffee, something that is
yes. Bicycles to produce coffee.
Bicycles, yes. Currently in the world, the coffee industry uses big machines that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. I came with the idea to use some bicycles to move the machines, the equipments that remove the husk from the coffee cherries. And guess what? It works. Even with one bicycle, we can produce 17 tons of coffee.
Wow.
I think this is actually the reason why I'm here also with you guys talking, because I had the chance to go to the Philippines to talk about it. I'm originally from Guatemala, but I've been living in Japan for 20 years. I also know about what the Japanese market is looking for, what they want, what they like. I've seen all those little and beautiful details that the Japanese market and also the working manners that they have helped to make the Japanese products be so successful. I was so impressed to see those very small pieces of land in Japan with rice fields, but they have their own brand.
Yes.
They really use their titles as being, for example, third generation of farmers in the Philippines, same as many other producing countries of different. In your case, you have a lot of fruits over there. Don't use that, because actually it's something that many people feel ashamed to feel that they are like third generation doing the same thing.
That's right.
So changing the mindset of the people is very important, and this is what I found out on going to countries like Guatemala and start teaching people about this. You could give them tools and you can give them money, but if they don't change their mindsets, it's difficult to improve. Now, I will just leave you with this sort of question, and is, how do you see the possibility for the companies like Japan? In my case, I will just go straight with myself. We have the plan to go to the Philippines and start the business there. We were even talking about opening a factory there to produce the bicycle machines. How can I be sure that my investments will be safe, and that all the topics that we were talking about today, or they will keep that, for at least, for example, to give me the safety to know that in the next 5 years, nothing is going to change suddenly and affect my business plan, because that's what I've seen that is always the biggest problem for everybody, that risk.
Mm.
And what could make me feel like safe to go there?
So I guess your question is for Mr. Christian?
I guess.
Okay.
All right. I'll my best efforts. The first is particularly for agriculture. The way what I've seen really is typically a joint venture. You must first and foremost, there is one commodity that cannot be seen on paper, and it is really trust. And so the first thing that you must do is really find that person or group that you can really trust. I was supposed to give answers like prepare business plans, but no. I'm just from experience. I've seen some businesses that started with very unexpected circumstances, like two people they met in one drinking pub, and then I'm not kidding. And then they just learned to know more about each other, and then that's it. But if I may add, on that particular route, you must also search or know more about the strengths and weaknesses of who you're dealing with, and there will always be cultural differences. So that's why it's important to know what has not been stated. Some people make good friends, but not necessarily business partners. So that's also, and no judgment there. I guess for me, it's more because expectations were not brought out. And I've seen that mainly, especially in the field of agriculture, like when working with cooperatives. You have to really also understand especially when working with the likes of cooperatives, their mindset it goes back, Carlos, to the mindset again, because we've worked with some cooperatives whose mindsets are really like produce, but they do not really appreciate how is it to have an enterprise, to run a venture, that in fact if you do some little sacrifices, you can actually gain more, a bigger share in a bigger cake. But then I have to really tell you that working also with sectors that are in the base of the pyramid, they also have their day-to-day needs. So that's why it can be difficult if your objectives don't match. Like if my objective is really both an element of sustainability, really good margin, not necessarily making money, but at the same time employing them, they may not be shared by who you're dealing with. So I guess the expectations part is really vital. State it very clearly to them and try to also get it from them, and your partner will really be very important, more than anything else, before you even talk about the tax arrangements, how the legal arrangement will look like, who will be the between the two, who will be the treasurer, who will be the purchasing person, who will be the CEO, for instance. So I'm sorry, Mr. Carlos, if my answer sounds a bit it depends. So, but I'm basing it really from, you know, what I have.
You're not promoting Mr. Christian.
I understand.
Yeah, but you know, that arrangement, really having that a joint venture really works, and really know each other very well, and then really agree on, especially if you're a bigger company, let's say, you have to be. I would not be surprised if I'm the foreign party. I would insist on at least the finance or the CEO. Or what else? Finance, CEO, and procurement. Normally, I mean,
your core team.
When dividing the, what they call this, the management setup, those are some rules of thumb, if I may share.
Maybe we can also hear from somebody who has already invested in the Philippines. Koji-san, would you have any advice for Mr. Carlos?
Actually, I am a heavy drinker.
It helps, by the way, Florence.
In my office and at home. And well, have you been to Japan? You stayed in Japan for quite many years, Carlos.
20 years.
20 years.
Oh yeah.
Yes, I'm in Japan now.
Oh, that's great. Oh yeah, really. And well, in the department store, a lot of more than 30, 40, kinds of coffee beans are sold, I think. And then I like Filipino coffee, which is called what's its name?
Liberica or Barako?
Barako.
Barako, yes.
I always drink Barako coffee, and so Japanese coffee drinkers kind of not fed up with, but kind of want a new taste. I think the Asian coffee beans will be booming, I think. Well, we usually drink, Kilimanjaro, mocha, and Brazilian beans, right? So we don't see a lot of Filipino-based coffee. Vietnamese and then the Indonesian coffee are very famous. But how about Philippine coffee beans in Japan, Carol?
I had a bunch of people that were expecting to get Philippine coffee after my trip. Yes, because when I took pictures and videos over there, and I brought some small samples, and it was very interesting, especially because Barako and Liberica, those are varieties that are not common to find.
Oh yeah.
Yes, they're very unusual. And there is something very interesting about the Philippines as well that you may not know, but about 200 years ago, the Philippines was one of the top producing countries of coffee in the world. But because of leaf rust, like a kind of disease that comes to the coffee trees, little by little it disappeared, and now it's trying to recover again. But yes, but I think there is a niche there for at least the producers of coffee now, to not just something that I teach is don't sell only the cherries, try to make the product so they can have a better income.
Have you guys tried Kalinga coffee? That's my favorite.
Kalinga coffee.
Yes. It's very, very good. It's from Kalinga, which is higher than Batangas, where Barako is from. Kalinga is from the mountain province. It's super good. And there are many other varieties of Philippine coffee, actually. I'm a coffee drinker too, so.
Yeah.
And I love Filipino coffee.
Yeah, there are several varieties, Florence, I agree. The Kalinga coffee, the Barako.
Yes.
In fact, I even went
the Sagada coffee.
The Sagada coffee, the Kapatagan coffee. I have a small coffee farm, by the way, Carlos.
Well, there you go.
Oh, good to know.
Carlos, you know who to contact.
No, just small. I just wanted to, I need to prune it. It should not be higher than a person and the like. But But I agree with you because in my last visit to, we were meeting a trade delegation last year in Japan. I was surprised that one of our, from a Japanese businessman who knew about Barako. How did you know about this Barako? And then because I told him that I visited also the old sake. And even I'm showing here the Nika whiskey, by the way. Oh, okay. Since 1934, we were trying how to mix coffee and whiskey.
It's good.
Yeah, that's why. So he said, "Oh, you should promote Barako." That's what he said. So how did you know about Barako? It goes well with this malt-based or whiskey. I don't know how they mixed it, but it seems, although it's anecdotal, but it seems to be confirming what Mr. Koji was saying earlier. Some specialty type of coffee. Yes, especially
Guys, I'm so sorry, but
coming from a location.
we have to call on our next.
Oh, all right,
Mr.
all right.
Ono.
Thank you.
Sir Ono, please join our discussion. Sir Carlos, you can stay with us.
Sorry,
All right,
about
thank you.
Ono.
Yes, Sir Ono. Sir Ono-san, can you do you have a question specifically for someone?
Thank you for having me here. This question is not for specifically someone or anyone.
Okay.
Just generic and also super basic question I have here. My question is about business owners in Manila. The strict lockdown has been implemented in Manila, except for basic needed business such as supermarkets. But I've heard that stores, malls, restaurants, those kind of things are closed. So I just wonder how they survive, how they earn income, or how they make ends meet. Is there any support from the government, or they just endure until this situation settles?
If I may quickly,
Yes.
looks like I'll have to answer quickly. For the bigger companies, they really have to rely on their own cash reserve. Government came up with guarantees for the small and medium enterprises. I can share after this call the publications that will summarize the support relief. And in our Congress, there is a bill to also come up with sector-specific intervention, especially for those that are distressed. But at the moment, other than the small and medium enterprises, they really have to rely on their cash reserve. Some are already, closing shop, at least for the SMEs, some of the SMEs. But the conglomerates are still able to hold up, mainly because of support from their mother companies.
So thank you. It'd be helpful if you could share with me the material later.
Yes, definitely.
By the way, I'm not a coffee person. Sorry, I apologize.
Right.
I'm a tea person.
I have tea too.
Yeah.
He's actually healthier.
I hope so. And I'd like to ask you one more question. I got slightly disappointed when I heard Philippines stepped back position of kind of attractiveness last year, 3rd position, but this year in the 7th position.
Right.
Why? I just want to know why Philippines stepped disgraded or downgraded since last year. My guess, my speculation is because the economy of Philippines is hugely relying on like tourist industry, but now it's difficult for that industry. Maybe that might be something to do with it. Maybe this question would be for Florence.
For me?
Yeah. Speculation.
I'm supposed to be the host, but okay.
You're not guest, I know.
I'm actually a small business owner myself. I own a travel company, and we are really you know, tourism will be the last to recover after this pandemic. So the projection is we won't be able to operate maybe within 6 months, and tourism will not really come back until after 2 to 3 years. So it's really a big blow to the tourism industry in the Philippines, especially to micro and small players like us. But your question is about how did it go down from top 3 to top 7?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure. Maybe because of the pandemic and the way the government is handling the pandemic. I'm not sure. Sir Christian, would you like to comment on that?
Well, I guess the other countries have prepared so much. Probably that's another way of looking at it. I know that we have 2 neighbors, especially our Vietnamese friends, who really are, twice a month I have updates with my ASEAN colleagues, and I kid my Vietnamese colleagues, how come everything is steady there? And then they said, try living in Vietnam. I said, okay, let me think about that. But from what I get from them is when the Vietnamese, I'm generalizing, when they put their mind into something, they will really do it. I mean, I guess all of us would have that kind of aspiration. I can see it, like, for instance, in one particular international standard, the Vietnamese, I recall, were the last in terms of adoption. But when they said we will accomplish it in 5 years, they were able to accomplish it in just 2 years. I mean, I'm just trying to draw the ethos. So it's possible also that the other companies, or rather the other countries, really have put their acts together and even work faster. At least that's my experience. Not necessarily because of we may be lacking on or we failed to do on something. So that's what I can share. Well, it's a wake-up call also. I guess we have to really do more.
Yes. Guys, sorry, but we have to move on now due to time constraints. But I hope that answered your question, Mr. Ono. Okay, so I'll pass it on to Roma now. Ms. Roma?
Yep, just give me 1 second. Okay, so I really enjoy listening to everyone. So the COVID-19 pandemic has wreaked financial havoc around the globe, so leaving many small business owners struggling in its wake. But now let me give you the highlighted points from our discussion. So the first one is that current government policies in place and undertaken, such as tax reform programs, are some of the reasons why Philippines managed to stay on top in the investment ranking. Secondly, the profitable industries under current situation are the healthcare, telecommunication, electronic, invoicing, education technology, and agriculture sectors. And lastly, the Philippine government is now treating internet connectivity as essential business gateway to sustain new normal marketing enterprise. To our dear viewers and to all entrepreneurs out there, think more outside the box. Think what you can do to prepare for a worst case scenario. Maybe having a plan B or even plan C, D, E, F, G can help improve your business odds of surviving and eventually thriving again during tough financial times. And that's all for our summary. And this is another informative and very substantial discussion with our guest speakers and of course to our guest audience and guest audience, and at the same time to my guest co-host. Thank you so much. And we would like to take this opportunity to hear messages from our guests and to everyone. How did you feel from our conversations and our discussions? And of course, maybe a short message to our dear viewers and all business entrepreneurs watching right now. So let's start with Mr. Onozawa.
Oh, yes. Actually, I've learned a lot, talking with you, and learned a lot from COVID-19. And we are definitely in the middle of the dramatic change. And then we may have to coexist with the virus. So, and then I want to be, and let us be the one most responsible to change. That's my message.
Thank you so much, Mr. Onozawa. Now let's have also Mr. Matsuishi.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I hope that everyone does not have this COVID-19 for their health, to keep good health. Then I think that by the end of this year, the people can go out freely. Of course, we have to take care of ourselves. However, of course, the online drinking session is good for us, but I would like to drink with the other one, the face-to-face. This is very fantastic for us. So I hope so.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Matsuishi. Now let's have Mr. Lauron.
Thank you for inviting me. I learned a lot from you, and it's really very helpful. If I may share with the audience here, if there's one important investment advice I can give, be healthy. Just be healthy. So I know some of us are having difficulty. Some of us are losing heavy amounts. So what if we become poor? As long as we're healthy, and remain the strength of spirit and focus of our mind. That's all I can share.
I couldn't agree more. Health is wealth.
Yes.
Okay, so let's have also from our guest audience, may we have Mr. Ono?
Oh, thank you for having me. PwC has been implemented working from home policy since May, and since then I'm missing my colleagues. So I'm excited back to the office, possibly in June. Stay safe.
Okay, so good
Thank
luck
you.
then. Okay, you're welcome. And let's also have Mr. Carlos Melen.
Well, thank you, everybody. It was a really nice session. I have to agree with something that you mentioned, Roma, about thinking out of the box. It's very important. It's very important to adjust to the new normal, be creative, to innovate. And just I want to share this because I think it's very important. For example, in my case, when you think about coffee trees, you think only about coffee. But actually, we are using something now that used to be garbage before, and now it became a kind of one of the star products in my company, and it's the husk of the coffee cherry that is just garbage for many farmers around the world. Right now, it sells 10 times more expensive than coffee itself. So that's thinking out of the box, right? The dead trees, the wood from those trees, now we are recycling that and we're making goods out of that as well. And just as I'm speaking, a box is coming to my company, and with the first samples of the flowers of the coffee trees and the baby leaves of the coffee trees, that we made teas out of that. We're doing some experiments right now. I leave you with that on your minds to be creative. Again, think out of the box. Don't just go with the traditional ways of that people have been doing for generations and generations. We need to find different ways. And maybe while doing that, we are going to find something really good and that could be actually even beneficial for the humanity. So keep it up and be safe.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Carlos.
you.
And let's have also my guest co-host, Ms. Florence.
Yes, so Mr. Koji-san was talking about promoting the Philippines earlier. So I think the number one advantage of investing in the Philippines is what we call the demographic sweet spot. I think we didn't really talk about that today. So I just want to point out that in the Philippines from 2015 to 2053, I think, there is a demographic state where the working age of people is larger than its dependents, which makes it a very promising country to invest in because of skilled labor and very competent workforce and a very young workforce. I think the average age is 23, if I'm not mistaken. So with that, thank you so much to all our guests and to you, Ms. Roma, and to Grandline for this platform to talk about a lot of social issues happening in our country right now.
Thank you so much, Ms. Florence. So I had so much fun today, and it was really an honor and very flattering to be talking and discussing timely social issues with great and prominent people like you. I am so happy and so delighted that I was given this trust and opportunity, of course. Well, in this crisis, it's not just about getting stuck in lockdown, but this pandemic also opens doors for greater opportunities in the comforts of our home. Ironically, still the best time to be connected. Well, that was a very enlightening discussion today. I've learned a lot, and I hope our viewers also learn as much as we did from our speakers. Well, thank you so much to our guests for today, and to everyone who joined us, including, of course, our technical staff. This will not be possible without each of you. And of course, we're looking forward to seeing you again to our next online salon. Thank you for watching us. Please don't forget to leave a comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And as we end this session, we would like to leave you with this classic thought of the day from Benjamin Franklin. An investment in knowledge pays the best interest. So invest in yourself, guys. Invest in your mind. Invest in your health. As Sir Christian said earlier, your happiness, you'll never lose.
Okay, so thank you so much, Ms. Florence.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so this is Roma, and for now, stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. It was a great session.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.